15 minutes, I want to tell you a story. 540 million years ago, there was this Cambrian explosion. You know, there was this complete burst of evolutionary energy. Lots of new things came about, new species came about. And if you try and understand why that is the case, the reason was that many things had come together. It was a fortuitous combination of many enabling conditions. Such a combination is happening in India for data. And, you know, next year is the year where I think it will be talked about publicly. The plan is to do that in January before the February summit, the French AI summit takes place. And this is a preview of that talk, a dry run of that talk. You could even say a rehearsal of that talk. So I'll quickly walk you through this. And just to set the stage, my goal is to introduce some of these efforts that are happening, you know, in addition to what you heard Professor Inder Gopal talk about, and how they all stitch together. What's the narrative that ties them all together? Why is that important? Because once you have the full picture, then you can leverage it much more effectively to solve hard problems that India needs solved. So that's the context here. I'll start by saying that at least in this worldview, there are three types of data. There is personal data. There is also non-personal data, you know, as Chris Gopalakrishnan committee talked about, or open data, you could say, public data. They're all essentially in the same box, or that kind of data sets. The traffic data that you were talking about will fall in that category. Geospatial will fall in that category. And then there is proprietary data sets, and where there is personal information there and privacy has to be maintained. So how do you tie all these three together? In India Stack, we've had this idea that we are about flow of people, flow of money, and the top layer is actually flow of data, right? Flow of information. And so the question that came up back in 2016 after UPI was done, some of you may remember UPI was launched in 2016, in August of 2016, the commercial launch took place. Soon after that, teams started working on the next layer of India Stack. So what I'm sharing with you, the genesis for this is 2016. And so the first part was to figure out the flow of personal data. And actually, on August 16th, 2017, the DEPA inference was launched, not far from here in Leela Hotel. And luckily, it caught the imagination of the Puttaswamy bench, because they referred to that in the last paragraph of the famous Puttaswamy judgment, which came on 24th August the same year. And that work has then culminated into two things, and somehow both happened in August. One is this August, on 22nd of August, the manifestation of that approach, which is called the account aggregator, reached 100 million consents. And it continues to grow very, very fast on a monthly growth rate, which is significant. So I will not be surprised if it helps meet one of the predictions that was made by the then governor of RBI, Raghuram Rajan, who pushed the account aggregator regulation out on his last working day. And then people asked him why. He said, my prediction is that 10 to 15 years later, when I look back, my real legacy will not be UPI, it will be the account aggregator. So that is August of this year. But August 13th of last year is when the president signed the DPDP Act. As you know, DPDP Act is essentially the account aggregator system being applied to all other sectors and giving the regulatory and the legal air cover for that to happen as we go. Now, what is this? This part is an important part. You'll have to deal with it, whether you like it or not. India is the leader in this area by a very wide margin compared to any other country in the world, is this idea of consented flow of data. And the consented flow of data following a set of principles, which I don't have time to go into, called organs: open, revocable, granular, auditable, notified, and secure, is already scaled out, as I said, in financial data, and in the coming years will scale out for all other classes of data. And why is this important? Because this is the piece that is related to what is called as the inference engine. So back in 2016, when we were thinking about what would be India's data economy compared to the rest of the world, we had the luxury to think in terms of AI systems. I know AI is now very popular. It wasn't that popular in 2016. But back in time, we broke up the data economy into two parts, the inference cycle and the training cycle. So if you go to depa.world, you will see there are only two parts there, depa inference and depa training. Now, what is inference? Inference is that I have this weekend coming up. A group of us, let's say 3 of us, want to go somewhere in Bangalore. We don't know where to go. We want to go and ask a human expert and say, hey, what would you recommend? Where should we go? And the more information we provide about ourselves, the better recommendation we are likely to get, right? Now, this is a willing trade-off to get of my privacy, because we've given a lot of information, and in return for a personalized recommendation. We believe this is the essence of what we need in many areas. We need that, of course, for lending. Lending is therefore one of the biggest areas where this is getting applied, and therefore the account aggregator. It is needed in health, and therefore PHR, the personal health records, our ability to have a health system that will deliver UHI in a significant fashion with $200 per capita instead of $2,000 per capita that other countries are doing, depends on our ability to do things that are right for that individual. It will require this. It will require, if we can give personalized study plans to our students, they'll be able to be more effective in what they study. So there are many areas where this kind of an interaction, inference cycle, would be extraordinarily important. And India has taken the lead by saying that this trade-off that you have to make, this trade-off can only be made by that data principle, the individual involved, because how does anybody else know on my behalf whether this is the right trade-off? Only I know, and therefore this trade-off should be, electronic, so that, I can revoke it, I can audit that it is purpose limited. In fact, the person who's using the data on the other side is using it only for the purpose that I gave it. So that system is in place. I think, we'll see a huge growth of it. The DPDP rules have been ready, and I think, MIT will hopefully release them anytime. It's been this week for many weeks now, and so it must be coming very soon. So that's number one. Number two is the training cycle. Training cycle, the theme back in time was, and that has become more important, that the human expert will be supported by an AI system. And why do we want that? Because if you're going to a doctor, we want every doctor to be a super doctor. If you're going to a teacher, we want every teacher to be a super professor or super teacher. If you're going, and so on and so forth. We want all of these professionals who are giving heuristic guidance or recommendations to be supported by AI systems that will allow ordinary professionals to behave in an extraordinary fashion. That's been the vision. And for that to happen, then it becomes important that if there's a lender, that lender is not merely relying on his or her heuristic knowledge or his or her bank's heuristic knowledge, but is relying on the heuristic knowledge that is available in the whole network. Same is the case with the doctor. The doctor is not relying on looking at 300 cases, but looking at the cases that his or her peers have also been able to see over a recent period of time. So to be able to enable that, we need to be able to allow for a training cycle to happen in India at scale. Now, if that training is taking place on quote-unquote open or public data, there are no privacy issues at all. Right? I mean, in fact, all the LLMs initially were all on public data. But as you may have seen, now reports are coming that GPT-5, the public data is only 30%. 70% of it is synthetic or private data. And so our assumption has been that in the world of competitive AI, model building, Your model's quality will depend on the quality of data, and therefore it will depend on the data that you are able to unlock from people who are not willing to put this in the public domain, and that is what would make a difference. This has been clear to us from OpenAI right from the beginning. Our friends in OpenAI told us that when GPT-3 came out, they were very clear it's public data, but for GPT-4, they would rely on proprietary data sets. They haven't released that number, but speculation is that 54 large data sets went into training GPT-4. For example, Capital One was one of the countries that gave 40 years of credit card data to OpenAI so that they could train on it. And now, of course, it was given an anonymized form. And so theoretically, everything is okay. But it is not okay, because there could be a malicious de-anonymization of that data in the hands of somebody outside Capital One. And if that happens, the liability is of Capital One. So when Capital One gives data to anybody else, Capital One is the training data provider. When it gives that data to anybody else, a training data consumer, they have to ensure good behavior of that party. And they are able to do that because they have penal clauses, legal clauses that ensure that good behavior will be there. And they have a legal system which is able to resolve these kind of disputes in weeks, because they have been doing this for altogether different kind of activity which are called CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, in New York courts, but we won't go into those details. So they have a legal system that allows them to do that. How many of you here, please don't be shy, have a driving license without a driving test? Right. So I think 10% are raising the hand. Usually it's 30%. Right? How many people don't renew their insurance, mandatory, legally required insurance in the second year? 30% again, right? So in India, rules are not a basis to shape behavior. So we cannot use the American system to do privacy-preserving training of models on proprietary data sets. So we need a different systems. That is DEPA training. And so today, I think we have all the three beginning to come together: personal data, the wonderful work that Professor Inder Gopal and the team have been doing on open and non-personal data, and DEPA training, which is in close pilots with a number of organizations. Today, all of this will start coming together by end of the year. Also will start coming together is the part that is to do with AI. AI has three parts, and I'm going to let's see, how am I doing? I have a few more minutes to go. And in AI, there are three parts. The focus is, of course, on diffusion. In fact, many people are focusing just on diffusion. We don't believe, at least in iSPIRT, diffusion is a very big problem. Diffusion is like mobile phone. You didn't need anybody to diffuse the mobile phone. The power, the value of mobile phone was so high that everybody found a way to get involved in that diffusion process commercially. There may be small pockets where commercial model may not work, and so therefore organizations like Vadhwani AI and People Plus AI may be helpful there. But diffusion is not a problem. India will adopt AI, has adopted AI very quickly. We know this because 30+% of the people who've been using OpenAI are from India. So diffusion is certainly not a problem. Our problem instead is two other problems. One is strategic autonomy. We need strategic autonomy in key parts of AI, especially for defense, for many other areas. And if we don't have that, we'll become a digital colony again. This is a very, very big threat. So a lot of effort has to go in. Geospatial data falls in that category. We need to be able to make sure that we have strategic autonomy for geospatial data if we have to be successful as a country in the future. And there are many other areas where this is true. The other part is safety. And I just want to spend a minute or two because there is interesting work happening there, and that will kind of complete the story. You know, we produce 23 million babies. Can anybody guess how much does China, how many, second largest country is China? How many? I'll give you a choice. 23 million, or let me say 22 million, about 23 million. 16 million, 9 million. 9 million. Nigeria is 8 million. If you take the next 5 countries after India, they just total up 23 million. We are the cradle for humanity. We are producing more babies than the next 5 countries put together. We have the largest number of under 15-year-olds in the world. And so therefore, what AI can do is to create a lost generation. And this lost generation is because AI may enable these young people, but may also cause distraction through AI pornography, AI gambling, AI gaming. And if you don't solve for that in a way in India, it is not going to get solved. And the Indian way cannot be the Western way. The West has chosen a way to do this by putting teachers in charge of what children learn over the parents. So you go to Germany, teachers have more power than parents. You go to America, teachers have more power over the parents, right? And this is controversial even in those countries, but this is impossible in Indian countries. That is not our cultural ethos. Our cultural ethos is that our parents will want to remain in charge of what their children's what they learn through AI and what they use AI. So we have to devise a new system. So therefore, in the DPDP Act, you will see a place for age, and India will launch in the coming months something called age tokens. All of you will be able to do that, and you'll be able to prove to a system on the other side that you're an adult. But if you don't prove it, you'll be treated like a child. And if you're treated like a child, then the curation engine that will be used by the social media company, an AI system, will be available for you to choose rather than for them to choose. So, and that is being practiced, or that is being rolled out in a pilot in India with InMobi, with Glance, the largest social media in India, and simultaneously in France with one of their large social media video companies. And so this is going to happen. And so therefore the AI Safety Institute of India is hoping to be the nodal point in the world for child safety. Because if we don't do it, nobody else will do it for something that will be suitable for India. And if India does it well, then all of global South will take this from India. So that is the responsibility that we have, and there is a lot of work that is happening in safety. And I'll finish with this. To make this regulation, including safety, come to life, we need to introduce a new way of thinking about this value chain of data. And the value chain of data, you may have heard this in the press, is India is adopting a model called the complex adaptive system-based regulation, which means that we will make the value chain actually visible to the regulators. And therefore, there is a liability chain. It is currently called the DEPA chain. So when you start with raw data, let's say with traffic department, it comes to IUDX, it goes to a modeler, the modeler gives it to an application, the application then deals with the consumer. There will be provenance of that trail that will be maintained so that you can actually ensure good behavior, but by not having to work with everybody in that trail, but by having to work with just one person in that trail. Now, why is this important? Because all the physical infrastructure that you see in India is because India created the world's largest liability chain. That it took some time and some pain to make it work, but now works. It is called GST. There is no other country in the world that looks at that liability chain. All the other countries, if I'm a cotton farmer and I sell to somebody who makes yarn to cloth, cloth to kurta, they do their GST settlements in any other country on the monthly net business that they have done. In India, because of very good advice that we got from the founder of Tally, who said, if you do it like this, there'll be leakage that you will not be able to control. Do it in a different way. And that different way was that we will do it by doing it not only at the invoice level, but at the line item of the invoice level. So India is the only country that tracks liability chain for tax at the line item of an invoice level. And so that has given us confidence that we can do that for data chain that is there. And that chain will also be a DPI as we go forward. It will be announced sometime in February or March of next year. And that then will help us do this new type of regulation, which is based on complex adaptive system-based regulation. Sanjeev Sanyal writes about this often. You can learn more about it. So just to wrap this up, all this is going to come together next year. 9 years after that effort started. And up till now, this effort has been known in pockets, largely because we have learned from an A/B test that it is better to be like DigiLocker or like Oken rather than be like crypto and ONDC. So there are two methods to roll an ecosystem out. One is create facts on the ground and let buzz follow. Second is create the buzz and hope that creates facts on the ground. And we have learned now from an A/B test that the first method works much better than the second method. And so, which was anyway what we were doing, and people said, no, try the second method. So we did, but it's not worked out very well. And so we remain focused on the first method. What does that mean? Is that the smart people have to dig to find out the big picture. And many of you have done that, and some of you may not have done that. So my goal today was to give you a glimpse of this. And then starting next year, you'll get an easier version of this. But use this time to get a special insight, a head start over your competitors about the data economy that is coming in India. Thank you so much. Hi.